largely connected to earth culture stuff,
Uh-huh.
food, and they even talked about danza, which is like very related to the earth. And now in this segment, we have two awesome guests. And Jim has 30 years of experience in education, teaching middle schools here in Denver. So we're going to hear a whole new, like, different perspective in that way too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So let's introduce our guests. Actually, let's let them introduce themselves. Jim, would you like to start and just share a little bit about who you are and give a little introduction?
Okay. My name is Jim. Oh gosh. I don't know. What do you want to know? I mean, I have spent since 1966 here in the Denver area. My folks moved out here from Arlington, Virginia, where I grew up. Went to high school down in the Bear Valley area, Kennedy High School. Went to college up in Fort Collins, Colorado State University, and started my teaching career right after that. I've been teaching in a variety of parochial and public schools, settled mostly in the Cherry Creek School District, where I taught middle school for many, many years. We can say that. Somewhere around 30 years there. And then retired. Gosh, I don't even know how long ago it was now, about 10, 15 years ago, something like that. And just kind of hanging out ever since. I started writing science fiction novels just for fun, and I've started working part-time at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, where I'm an educator performer. Get to wear an astronaut suit and talk to kids about dinosaurs and science and all kinds of cool stuff.
Awesome.
That's really cool. Can you maybe give us like where did you grow up in Denver? Maybe I missed this while I was reposting, but like the specific area.
We spent most of our time down in Bear Valley, down in southwest Denver.
Okay. And what was that like? Can you just like maybe take us through growing up in Bear Valley? What was your childhood like? What were you up to?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm the oldest of 6 of us. There were 8 of us in the family. It was a home where well, my father traveled a great deal. He was an attorney for a local union, and he traveled all over the country dealing with issues. So he was gone as much as he was home. So my mom raised us quite a bit on her own. Being the oldest, I was kind of always made the responsible one, so I always had to be kind of on my best behavior a lot of times. Not that I always was, but most of the time. But growing up, you know, oh gosh, I don't even know how to really say. I was always interested in science, and so I was always in the nerd group at school. Our favorite pastime every weekend that we could was building and launching Estes rockets out in a field that I'm still angry about, because they built another school on my rocket field and I couldn't launch anymore. But I'll get over it someday, I think.
That's a funny example of like how things have changed, you know, like
Yeah.
they built a school over your rocket field.
Yeah, the you know, stupid Denver public schools, I tell you.
And before we go too much farther, that's on me. Dave, could you introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Jim's son. My name's Dave. I was born here in Denver, in 1981 at St. Anthony's. And we lived most of the time in Aurora. But the part of Aurora that we lived in got turned into Centennial, so it's not called that anymore. I went to Eagle Crest High School and graduated in 2000. And then I went up to CSU as well, and I for a couple of years. I graduated with a degree in history, and then I couldn't find a job. So I decided to go back to school at Metropolitan State College of Denver. I think it's State University of Denver now. And got a degree in computer information systems. And since then, I've been working mostly testing software and writing code to test and doing fun stuff like that. I have 2 daughters, the oldest of which is pretty severe special needs. And I've lived in and around Denver a fair amount. When I moved back from Fort Collins, I lived in the Highlands most of that time, and it was pretty interesting. And then 4 years ago, I moved back to Fort Collins, and that's where I live now. So yeah, it's kind of my brief history.
Well, just a question for both of you. Do you feel like you identify with being a Denverite? Do you feel like Denver has embedded itself into your identity?
For me, that's kind of an obstinate sort of a point with me. Growing up, well, after I got married and everything like that, my wife is a native, and all of our friends are natives, everything. So I kind of refused to allow that thought to become part of me. I still consider myself a Virginian. So, but that's more just my own stubbornness. I mean,
well, it's also quite a Denver thing, right? Like, even the use of the word native is like a way that people identify themselves as being from here. It's like there's a lot of pride in being born in Denver.
Yeah, well, the weird thing though is that even though I was born in Kansas City, like my dad was, but my grandfather, my father's dad, was born here in Denver, and his parents came here for years and years before that. So every generation of my family, going back quite a few, has actually lived here in Denver.
Wow.
But yet, I just I spent a few years outside of it, and I don't know why. I just feel that way. So strange.
What about you, Dave? What do you feel about that relationship to the city of Denver?
I feel very attached to it. We have wedding pictures inside of or just outside of Coors Field, and I have stories from all over it. So not even my dad's family. So his grandfather, like he was talking about, their house was where that big parking lot where Coors Field is, behind Gate A. That's where their house was. And then on my mom's side, her grandfather designed the face of the Daniels Tower clock on 16th Street Mall.
Wow.
So
that's so iconic.
Yeah, and we have pictures of my dad's grandfather. He was a doughboy in World War One, and he was enlisted out of Denver, and we have pictures of that. And then even for me, so I have a lot of fond memories of going to Bronco games when I was little, going to the museum and the zoo, and I've lived here my entire life, even though a big chunk of it's been in the suburbs or up here in Fort Collins. But my first job was a ticket taker at Coors Field. I've walked down 16th Street Mall more times than I can remember. there's so many things, and it's just hard to identify with any other city, I would say. Fort Collins is getting up there, but
Yeah.
Denver's, yeah.
I think that's really cool. I mean, I can really hear it in your voice when you're talking about Denver, just how much this area means to you and what you've attached to it. I had just a particular question. What is a doughboy?
They were the infantry soldiers for World War One.
Okay.
The main infantry.
Cool.
Yeah.
The famous picture with the broad brim hats and the little bull helmets. That's kind of their nicknames. So
awesome.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned walking down 16th Street Mall as part of your memories of Denver and stuff. I didn't have that because when I was younger, I mean, before college and everything, and even long after, downtown Denver rolled up the sidewalks and went to bed as soon as everybody left home to go, left work. There was nothing that happened downtown. I mean, Coors Field didn't exist. Pepsi Center didn't exist, or I don't know, what do they call it now? The Ball Center? I don't know. But I remember McNichols Arena getting built, and now it's even gone. And the old Mile High Stadium that used to be Bears Stadium that I went to, those were all outside of downtown, but there was nothing to go to downtown ever.
So when you were a kid, what did you all do? What was your central meetup location? What did that, paint a picture of that?
Well, I didn't do that sort of thing. My couple of friends that I really hung out with, we built the rockets and went out in the field, or we shot baskets in our neighborhood or things like that. If we really wanted to live it up and splurge going somewhere, we went to Cinderella City, I guess would be the place.
Cinderella City?
Yeah, that doesn't exist anymore.
What is that?
But it was built back in, I guess 65, something like just before we moved out here. It was one of the largest and most famous malls in the country at the time. It was down Hamden and Santa Fe, roughly, down in Littleton. I think they call it the Englewood Town Center now or something like that. It's all been completely demolished and rebuilt. But it was a great big mall, and it had all these different sections that were color-coded. So you would go to the Emerald Mall for certain types of shops, and then the Gold Mall for another type of shops, and the Blue Mall.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So it was, but they were all connected. You could just walk from one to other, all indoors, and there were hundreds of shops there.
So, did you have freedom to go out and run around? Were your parents go to the mall, get out of here?
Oh yeah.
When you were young?
Oh yeah. Oh, even back in Virginia when I was little, it was the main thing. Well, we had a neighborhood there were a bunch of the kids who were all in large, good Catholic families, lots of kids.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was basically, I need to take care of the baby. Go away, go find something to do, and I'll call you when dinner's ready. And opening up the screen door in the back and just hollering, hoping that they heard us. Or that we heard them.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, that was, and then as soon as we ate dinner, we were right back outside again.
I'm curious, and Dave, you can weigh on this too, and how this changes between you two, but what was your perception of Denver? Right now I see it as a town where a lot is happening. There's so much shifting and changing, and there are transplants coming in and out. And I'm curious, what did you see Denver as when you were a kid? And start with Jim, and then Dave. I'm curious how Dave relates to what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, Denver itself was, ow. Oh, I just got cramped.
Oh.
Ow.
Oh, that's terrible.
A little battle scar from the Zoom. Yep. It's tough out there.
Denver itself, like I say, it was such a quiet town. It was a small town. The population when I was a kid here, I mean, it was less than 500,000 people in the entire metro area, much less the city and county itself. I mean, the city and county of Denver itself now has more people than the entire state did when I was a kid here.
Wow.
So there wasn't all that much to do. A lot of the reservoirs were not built. I mean, so there was none of that recreation to go to. You just pretty much, I mean, you go up to the mountains and go skiing, but I didn't ski at the time. So we went camping a lot in the summers. Everything was away from the town. Everything was away from the city. It just was nothing to do in the city when I was there. So Dave, what's your? How are you?
I feel like that early on, it was still like that. It honestly felt like it started. The big change was when Coors Field got built in Lodo, and that seemed to open up a lot of the city. I mean, we would go it was still kind of like McNichols a Mile High were on the other side of the highway. You still didn't feel quite like you were downtown or anything like that. And I remember we would go to like the St. Patrick's Day parade occasionally, and we go to like we would go to the Buell to see the Christmas Carol and a few things like that, but there really wasn't. It didn't seem like there was much reason to go to actual downtown. I feel like we would go other places like the zoo or the museum more. It felt like Denver, it's like came alive a lot during the mid 90s, I would say. And that's also, I feel like, when a large population influx started, was kind of in that time period. And we started having to, that's also when we, the highways started getting too filled, and they did this. I remember they started the T-Rex project during that time. And by the time they finished it, it was already obsolete, and our highways were just as bad as they were.
Oh,
so
God.
it was like,
so the highways have always been a problem.
well, they weren't too bad before that. Like my dad was saying, Denver was not a big city, and it's still not compared to like New York or other places like that. But it was not anything like it is now, and it didn't start looking like it does now until Lodo started changing, really. It was very much, you only went downtown to work, or there wasn't really much reason. There were more reasons to go to things maybe on the outskirts of the city, or go to the mountains, or go.
When I was going to college, going up I-25, which I think at the time it was still called the Valley Highway. I'm not sure when the name changed officially, but people were just still calling it the Valley Highway. It was not crowded. You didn't have to worry about traffic jams on that road. You just went and you maintained the speed limit, which was 55 at the time, so it took forever anyway, but that was a trek up to Fort Collins at that speed. But yeah, I mean, I've got a picture here of what downtown Denver looked like back in the late 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you notice a severe lack of tall buildings.
Yeah.
maybe 4 of them. That
That's
was
the bell tower, right? In the middle there? Is that the bell tower? Wow.
yeah. Security Life building was one of the tallest in downtown at the time, and now you can't even find it when you're driving by.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, the growth, like David said, took off during the mid-90s or so. There was an oil boom in the 80s and mid to late 80s, and people just came in like crazy. So
Yeah, I remember like the biggest event was the stock show.
Oh,
And
yeah.
nowadays, people don't even know what the stock show is. So,
Do you,
You know.
do you have memories of going when you were young?
oh yeah, we went every year for a long time. And I don't know if they still do this. They would actually take the livestock down the streets of downtown Denver to get it there.
Oh,
To
wow.
what's they might still do it. I'm not sure. Down to the convention center.
Uh-huh.
That's
Um,
cool.
So it was like a major event in Denver for until the 90s, I would say, or maybe even into the 2000s.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like, you hardly hear about it anymore. So
Well, did
Well-
you ever notice how a lot of people leave their Christmas lights up until like the end of January? That's because it was a thing to do for the stock show. Keep Denver lit up and keep it all looking great and festive for the stock show. So people just left all their Christmas lights up in the city and county, never took down the Civic Center lights until after the stock show was over.
That's such a cute, like, cow town kind of story, you know?
Yeah.
It was a cow town for so long, I mean, until very recently.
It's so interesting because Danny and I are not from here. And so our experience is just, we just don't know, like, what it was like before, you know?
Right. I've been to the stock show like maybe 5 years ago and had no context to that it had history, that it was like a huge deal. Like I thought it was just like a cool thing on the side.
Yeah.
No, it was at the time, back in the well, before the mid 90s, it was probably the single biggest event in Denver. I mean, during a year. I mean, that was it. Until the Broncos won their first Super Bowl. That kind of became a big deal. The Broncos really became big, but no, the stock show was it.
So like with all of these changes, I wonder, do you have, you know, like you were a little bit grumpy about losing your rocket launching lawn, of course, kind of a joke. And like, you know, the traffic has changed and the whole shape of the city has changed. And I think culturally, Denver has changed a lot. How do you feel about all of that? When you think about how Denver is now, does that?
That's a good question.
You know, I mean, for me, it's simply the way things happen. You know, more people come into an area and you get more diversity, and some people accept it and some don't, and it's just a matter of working through those growing pains. Oh gosh, I mean, when I was a kid, there, well, back in the late '60s, when all the civil rights rioting was going on all over the country, Denver wasn't seeing that because the mayor and the governor went to great pains to try to work through it, I guess, with the community. But what was prominent was the Chicano movement at the time. That took a lot more of Denver headlines than the Black movements. So it was a different sort of cultural movement for here than a lot of places. I remember when I was like a sophomore in high school, a huge thing was the students at West High School just got up and walked out of class and were marching around protesting and hanging on street corners and yelling and screaming and holding up signs and whatnot. And because they were protesting injustices in their education system. And oh gosh, Corky Gonzalez, Che Guevara were big names here with the immigrant farmers or immigrant farm workers. That was the big minority issue for Denver.
And so you were in 10th grade when that happened?
I believe so, yeah. That's the way I remember it. 1969, something like that.
Mm.
Can you expand on that? Like, what did you know of it at the time, or did you know anything about it?
Just what was on the news and what some of my teachers told me, because I mean we were pretty far removed from it out there at Kennedy. I mean it was, I mean when I was in high school there was one student of color basically. That was it in our neighborhood in that school. So he was a black kid in my class. Alex English, I think was his name. That's what I seem to remember. But it just wasn't diversity was not a thing when I was in school. That happened shortly after I graduated.
Would you speak on what it was like when that happened, when that transition happened?
It was dramatic, to say the least. When I left Kennedy, when I graduated from Kennedy, like I said, it was purely, pure vanilla America. I mean, that was, which was not unusual at the time. Nobody thought anything about it. I went off to college, got my teaching certification, did my student teaching back at that same school, the school that I graduated from, with all the same teachers and everything. But in the meantime, busing had happened to try to integrate students. So students were brought from the inner city schools, West and George Washington and South and East High School, all those schools, and brought out to the suburbs where Kennedy was, and Lincoln and a few others. And then students from our school were sent to theirs.
Wow.
And it was, the environment was night and day different. I know the teachers were a little still trying to adjust to it, but I don't know. I mean, I just kind of saw it as, oh, okay, let's go with it. You know, let's see how this works, because it's just something new and different, and I need to learn how this works now.
I'm curious how because when you came back, my understanding is you were a teacher, right?
Well, I was at the same school. I was a student teacher.
Okay. And you can speak to this more broadly, but well, actually, I kind of want to know what drew you to education, and where did you end up teaching, and what was your journey through education?
Kind of a shock, actually. Not at all what I ever anticipated. I went to college to study veterinary medicine. I figured, at the time I was kind of a angry young person at the world, and I didn't want to deal with people. And I really enjoyed animals. So I figured, oh, okay, I'll become a veterinarian, and then I don't have to talk with people very much.
You became a teacher.
Right. That's amazing.
Yeah, that I kind of outgrew that a little bit. But as I was taking courses and whatnot, I got to a point where I just suddenly realized, no, this stuff is way beyond what I ever even want to learn. So what can I do? I changed my major to zoology, and thought about, okay, well, maybe I'll get into research, primate behavior and stuff like that. But my roommate was a math education major, and he started getting me to help tutor some of the others in the dorm, which I wound up marrying one of them. And which she didn't actually need a whole lot of help with her studies, because she was getting better grades than I was, but I guess it was a plot on her part to get to know me, coming down and asking for help. But
Classic.
Yeah, I was a little dense. I didn't know how that whole thing worked with girls and stuff at the time. But I started finding out that not only did I kind of enjoy doing that, but I actually had a knack for being able to take difficult concepts and explaining them so that people can understand it. So I got very interested in it and decided, oh, okay, well, I'll finish my degree and go back and get my certification, and that's kind of where it went, and how I got into it. I taught for a while. I say in the parochial schools that when Holy Family was downtown by the old Elitches, also, well, not downtown, 44th and Tennyson, just north Denver, basically, just east of Wheat Ridge. The old Elitches amusement park was right down a few blocks from there before it moved across by the Platte. Taught 7th, 8th grade there. Went up to Adams County for 1 year. Back downtown, I taught at Central Catholic High School, which doesn't exist anymore either now. All these places are gone. I'm old. For heaven's sakes. They keep bulldozing down my old schools. But yeah, I taught there for a couple of years. Then it closed, and I wound up being in Cherry Creek School District after that. So kind of a whole mix, a lot of more inner city schools, and then more suburban after that.
So, Dave, did you ever have your father as a teacher?
Yeah. It's an interesting experience, having your parent be a teacher or being. They had these. They called them mini courses. They were like fun classes. I never took an actual science class with them, but I did take a mini course or two with them. So it's interesting. Like, you have the perception of from the other kids that they can't talk to you about anything, but you can also have the thing looming over your head of instant trouble if you do anything wrong because your dad's just in the next room or whatever. So
double consequence.
Yeah. So
yeah, both he and my other son attended the same middle school that I taught at, but it was we purposely put them on other teams so that I didn't have them in the regular classes. I didn't want to do that to them, and they didn't want it either.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. We had some interesting stuff there, so it was fun.
Did you ever have have a moment where you were like, man, the kids of this generation are so different from me when I was young?
Oh, from day one. Yeah. I mean, the world had changed since I was their age.
Can you tell us a little bit about how your childhood experience was different from Dave's childhood experience or some of the other kids that you taught?
When I was going through elementary up through maybe 7th grade, and we're talking the 50s and early 60s. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of propaganda or the push through television and radio and everything that, what was it, the Dick Van Dyke Show and Mary Tyler Moore and that was later, Donna Reed and Father Knows Best. That was the emphasis. Mom stays home and cooks and raises the kids, and dad goes off to work, and you trust the government because they're here to look out for you. That was what I grew up in, the environment that I grew up in. So it took a long time. That's why pretty much why the 60s exploded, because it became very quickly very obvious that wasn't really the case in a lot of situations. So
It's so interesting that you say the 60s exploded.
Well, yeah, the first half of the 60s was very quiet, very much 50-ish. You know, the 50s just extended a little bit. And then around, when Vietnam War really started ramping up around 66, 67, and it started getting broadcast into our living rooms during dinner time.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, people were watching, pretty much live broadcasts of war right in your living room, not sanitized.
Was it gory?
They tried not to show a lot of that, but yeah, you would see people just, the soldiers just shooting back and everything, and things exploding around them.
Oh my God.
Whatnot. I don't know that I don't exactly recall anybody dying on TV or anything like that, but yeah, it was a very rude awakening for much of the country. And then just before that, we had Kennedy's assassination. Then we had Martin Luther King's assassination, Robert Kennedy's assassination, all within just a few, Robert and MLK were within just a few months of each other. The rioting at the Democratic National Convention in '68, the civil rights movement from King that was pushing earlier than that, and the police reactions and all of that at the time for that was all brand new to people, and at least those of us that weren't experiencing it for our lives. Most of the country was seeing all this for the first time and having a very rude awakening all of a sudden. And
is that how it felt for you? Did it feel like a rude awakening to you?
Yeah. The Kennedy's assassination was devastating. They let us out of school early, and I remember running home in tears over it.
Wow.
I was like in the 4th grade at the time. So, and then sitting there watching the Kennedy's acceptance speech in California, and saying, okay, we're on to Chicago or whatever it was, and then all of a sudden everything broke loose, and there he is laying on the ground dying. And then the news report of Martin Luther King's assassination coming over the news that evening. Just these things were shocking, and just made me really reevaluate how the world really was.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. Is like, how did you see the world then after all that?
I'm not sure I could put it into words. It where it was, it seemed beforehand, and this could just be that it all happened when I was, becoming a teenager as well.
Mm-hmm.
Life changes when you're in your early teens, but or your view of the world does, but all this was happening at the same time. So I changed from the world feeling like a very safe, wonderful place to something, oh, okay. And then I started realizing that, wait a minute, this is a war that I could get drafted into.
Uh-huh.
And for 2 years, I was very eligible for it and was very nervous about it and trying to figure out, what do I do if I do wind up getting drafted? So fortunately, I never did. My numbers were always way too high. But it just, I don't know what I would have done.
Did you consider running off to Canada?
Yeah. Considered it.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, it was a very scary thing. Because I'm not someone who wants to go around shooting people, ever. My biggest thing, though, is I think I kind of finally settled on, well, okay, if that happens, I'll probably run down to the recruiting office and join the Navy and try to work on a medical ship or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have my science background and I know a lot of first aid, and I can probably convince them of something like that. that was kind of where I was gearing up to. But then the draft ended and I never did have to do anything about it.
These big historic moments that just shape the way that we see the world. Like, I mean, I think that for us, that's like 9/11 and Columbine too, which happened here in Colorado.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, we actually have we have a close family member who's just a year or two younger than me, and I was a sophomore in high school at Eagle Crest, which basically is the same dynamic, the same culture, the same, just, a bit farther south. And that day I had gone to a field trip at Buckley Air National Guard, and I came home, or we came back to Eagle Crest, and the halls were empty. We didn't know what was going on. And I walked up. My dad taught at Thunder Ridge Middle School, which is just up the hill. And I walked up, and there were security guards everywhere around the school. And I found him, and he told me what had happened. And he actually has a story too about that day. And it's interesting because my dad was just talking about how Kennedy's assassination and stuff like that. I feel like Columbine for Denver is very personal and very it has affected the nation, and it has maybe not to the extent of like the Kennedy assassination and stuff like that. But that was the moment for me where the world became not where you learned that the world isn't safe. And I remember everything stopped around Denver. The Broncos didn't play. The Rockies didn't play. They played this. There were these two brothers from Columbine, and they wrote a song that they played it on the radio like over and over. It was called "We Are Columbine," and I just remember like breaking down my mom's arms and crying, and it's still hard to talk about. And I remember going back to school next couple days, and it was like a different world immediately. And our family member, it took him probably about 10 years to seem like he was the same person again after that.
Wow.
So, but that event in particular like stands out in my life as something. I mean, and there's been the Aurora shooting and other things that have happened around Denver too, that probably are a come out of that. But that was interesting too. And like 9/11 was definitely, I mean, everyone was impacted by that. It just was very interesting time. So for us as a metro area and a city and a state, I feel like it was kind of like the country's eyes were on us for that time period. So.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, well, first, thanks for sharing that. That was really powerful. I appreciate your vulnerability with that. I forget how old I was, but I was in in Ohio at the time, and I remember the whole, like you said, the whole conversation became about Columbine in Denver. Like even in my middle school, 2,000 miles away.
I had never heard of Denver, I don't think, until that day.
Mm. Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was definitely a powerful day. I would equate that with the towers coming down and the Kennedy assassination as far as the impact that it had in my mind anyway. So, but like David said, there was a definite family involvement with that. So, I mean, my sister taught with me at Thunder Ridge, and they told her first, and they wouldn't let her drive back home to try to be with her kids. And they came and got me out of the classroom, didn't tell me what was going on, just told me to run to the office. So I have no idea. And I get there and she's just completely a mess, understandably, because her son is a freshman at the school, and he was a football player who the word was at the time that they were targeting those guys. And so she was panicking, and I had to drive her over there. So I remember being up at the little corner little strip mall that was as close as we could get, up on a hill overlooking the school, helicopters, police, ambulances, everything, all this commotion going on down there. She's trying to find her son. And I had to go over to the elementary school to get her other two kids and convince the security person at the door was, well, just one of the main office secretary or something, one of the teachers, that I was who I was. And I finally had to say, look, no, I know you don't know who I am, but go get one of the two of them, either one, and they'll identify me for you, but I have to take them home. And they finally did, and we spent some time there, and then I had forgotten completely that I had to leave to go back to get David and Sean from the school, because I guess I was back there by the time school was out. But yeah, that was quite a day as well.
Wow. How does a community move forward from that? It makes me think about like the relationship to healing and forgiveness. Is that part of it?
It was hard, but I remember, like, in my high school, they put out a giant butcher paper, and every kid in our school like went and wrote a message on it, and they sent it to Columbine. And I think most of the high schools did that. And I feel like we as a city tried to really wrap ourselves around those kids. The sports teams, the government, the other schools, but it was hard, just because Denver was kind of idyllic before that. There wasn't, things like that didn't happen then. And now it seems like it's not uncommon for things like that to happen here on more common occasion than other places for some reason. And I don't know why that is. But it's not surprising like it was.
Which is the real terrible thing, that something that horrible is not shocking and surprising anymore.
Right.
Yeah, and it was an interesting time, and it's just something that kind of marked our generation, I feel like, of the late 90s, early 2000s, high school kids in Colorado. This is part of who we are. And, and we went to his graduation, and that was pretty emotional, because it was the last group of, since he was a freshman, it was the last group of kids that were actually there. And so I remember that was a pretty emotional thing when they did that graduation. And I don't know if maybe my dad can talk to it a bit more about the citywide stuff, what they were, because I still I feel like I was emotionally just a high school kid trying to understand this in my world stuff. So I don't know beyond like the stuff I've described, like what exactly went on. So
Yeah, well, I know, I mean, at least as far as the teaching community, there was, holy cow, a scramble to try to figure out how do we try to make these kids feel safe again? What can we do? Do we have to barricade the building? Do we talk about it? What do we say? Do we let it go? Do we let them start the conversations? Do we initiate it? How do we do this? It was something nobody had ever thought we would have to think about. So, yeah, I mean, there were a lot of different approaches to a lot of different things, and I don't know how much of an impact we actually really did as far as helping them get through it. We managed, we went through it. We managed to conduct business and get some learning done. But yeah, it took a while to, for everybody to kind of get back to their normal sort of selves in the classroom, at least.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, just as you're describing it, like the chaos of the situation and like how it's like sprung upon you, how can a community prepare for that? And how can a community know even how to heal with something so new and so like, as it sounds, just shock to the system?
Yeah, I mean, the kids these days have shooter drills, basically the old duck and cover from when I was in when I was in school. We had the duck and cover drills to protect us from a nuclear bomb. So because when I was a kid, that was an actual. I mean, we came apparently within a couple of hours of a nuclear war, and where I lived was #1 target. So yeah, I mean, and we didn't know that exactly at the time. It came out later, but everybody was really terrified of that then, and now they're terrified of this. So subject just seems to keep changing. Not sure that we ever actually cured what was wrong. So,
that's the crazy thing is like just hearing all of this and thinking like, wow. I feel like these same questions that you were asking in the teaching community are being asked again now. And it gives me this feeling like, oh, this isn't about reinventing the wheel. Like these kinds of like collective trauma tragedies, like what's happening with the coronavirus this year, and with all of the, the protests and stuff as well. Like those are things that you need to talk to kids about. And people don't know how to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I'm out of the classroom at this point. I mean, I don't know how to approach all of that. I mean, you just do the best you can and take a lot of lead from the kids and hope for the best. Basically, there is no guidebook on any of it.
Yeah. Wow. I'm currently working with kids. Actually, I work at a treatment facility. And I work in the school for the treatment facility. And there have even been talks, like you're talking about the duck and cover. There's even talks now of like being actively throwing things or creating distractions or defending yourself now when the shooter comes in. And the conversation just keeps evolving. And, you know, with coronavirus, as Chelsea's mentioning, it just makes me think of like when you're in that position, it's just like almost like the adults and the kids kind of have to work together to figure out what they're experiencing at the time that they're experiencing it.
Yeah, it is a very different world than when I was little. I mean, yeah, we had a couple of those things, but it was never, I mean, some of the biggest things I had to worry about was, did I know how to spell Mississippi? You know, it's just,
I still gotta worry about that one too.
talk to my mother, she'll teach you her song.
I was just about to say, can you guys do it right now?
MISSISSIPPI.
Damn.
Well done.
You
Still
are
got
the
it.
son of a teacher.
Oh, goodness.
Well, Dave, if you could speak on what kind of things do you think about for raising your children, you know, in 2021 that might be the same or different from these other stories?
It's difficult. My oldest, she is just turned 6.
6.
Yeah, starting to lose track of the years. But she has a very rare genetic condition called inverted duplication and deletion of 8p. There's not even an actual like name for it. It's just what's wrong with her genetics. There's only about 200 kids in the world that have this. And so we've already kind of have had to learn to live in a bit different of a world than most people because of this. I was just talking about earlier. So basically she has the mind of a 1-year-old inside of a 6-year-old body. And so we have things like she broke our child locks. Child locks don't work with her. And so we've had to buy like these steel cable child locks. We're not going to be able to have things on our counters anymore because she goes and grabs them and does all sorts of stuff with them. So you throw that on, and then you throw on this year, and it's hard. I feel like special needs kids are kind of getting lost in all of this conversation. I mean, it's hard enough on the traditional kids and stuff, but they can still do the Zoom classes, and they can still interact. We had to pull my daughter out of school, and we're doing independent physical therapies and stuff like that, and that's been really good for her, but she doesn't have the interaction. And my daughter won't wear a mask, and so we can't send her back when the other kids go because they would have to keep her 6 feet away or put up plastic in between her and the other kids, and the teachers would have to wear full PPE. So we've kind of made the decision to hold off till next school year to kind of see how it goes. But it's been a challenge to raise. I can't even imagine what it would be like if my youngest, she's going to be 4 here, and she kind of knows what's going on, and but still it's a little bit, we've been able to shelter her pretty good from it. And she knows something's going on, but she still has a lot of fun. And but it's hard to be a parent in this time and try and provide some normalcy for them, and in a time that's anything but. And I just don't know what the future is going to look like for them. And so it's kind of taking one day at a time and trying to, I was watching Lord of the Rings the other night.
Nice.
And it's in the book too. But there's this scene where they get into Mordor and the rings like weighing heavy on Frodo. And like, he is like done. And he looks up and he looks in the valley and he sees all the orcs. And he's like, and Sam says, let's just make it down the hill for starters. And, I feel like that's what we need to do, is just, okay, how do we get through this day with my kids? How do we get to therapies? How do we navigate one day at a time? And I can't, another joke I've been saying is, Godzilla could show up tomorrow and I would not be surprised. So,
that Sam metaphor is so good, because God, Sam is the sweetest, and it's like we all need a little Sam inside of us to talk to us sometimes.
Yeah. So I think just trying to take it one day at a time with my kids, and trying to raise them best I can through craziness, and trying to engage in, it was already kind of crazy world with trying to raise a kid that you don't know what it's going to look like anyway. So it's just another layer.
Yeah. I grew up with a special needs person in my household as well. And one thing that was really hard about it, especially as she started getting older, was just interfacing with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have a thought of like, what are some things that you wish people understood about that experience?
It's really hard. It's interesting because everyone's kind of different, and sometimes it's like someone helps out too much and you're like, no, you can step back, it's okay. and then you get to the other side of it where it's someone that's completely oblivious to it and doesn't think that thinks that my kid's just a normal kid. And so I think kind of just an understanding that it hurts and that it's different, and that maybe just listening sometimes is the best, and not offering suggestions, not trying to come up with things to fix it, because there's not a day that goes by that I wish I couldn't fix everything for her. And I haven't, there are times where I need suggestions and I need things. But a lot of times it's just like, I'm constantly grieving almost for the child I thought I would have, and trying to learn to accept where I'm at, and learning that that's a good thing, and learning that this life can be good with her, and that she's a joy, and she's got a lot of issues, and she's she can't talk, she can't walk without her walker, she can't do that, but she communicates, and she's a joy, and she's happy, and she laughs. And just trying to, listen to somebody and understand where they're coming from instead of trying to fix their situation and trying to put your own world on them. Because that seems what it's like a lot of times. Like my wife will go somewhere and she'll be doing something will be hard happening with my daughter. And a mom, meaning well, will say something like, well, all kids go through that. And that's not really the point, It's point is that this is hard in this particular situation, and it's different. We have a kid that doesn't have wonky genes. That's a traditional kid. And there's plenty of challenges with her, and she's a vibrant 4-year-old, and but it's different, and it's a different world with my older one. And so I think when someone takes the time just to listen and acknowledge that it's hard, and that's what matters, is when they aren't trying to impose something, or they aren't trying to fix something, but just trying to understand.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Dave. That sounds incredibly challenging. And I think what's so amazing is how transparent and honest you were with your experience just now. I think it takes a lot of courage, and I like 100% mean that, because you just were so raw right now and how you laid that out. And I think everybody listening appreciates that as well.
Thanks. It's it's good. It's when you're in these situations, it takes time, and it is like grieving. It's like never quite are the same, and you're gonna get hit with it different days or different occurrences. But there can be a lot of joy and a lot of good things in where you're at. And if you block yourself off to that, then you're just setting yourself up for always being in despair and always being, not ever getting over the grief, basically. So,
yeah, it sounds like you're able to be honest with your emotions about how you're feeling and the grieving you're talking about, and also being able to take stock in what joy and what growth and what love comes from that too.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. I was probably the first 2 years, I was pretty angry about it, and it takes time, not to feel wronged, or not to feel like it's my fault or my wife's fault or somebody's fault. It's no one's fault. It's, it is what it is. Mutations happen, and there's, when you learn about your child, even when they can't say a word, and what they're communicating, it's pretty amazing. So
it's amazing. That's so
yeah, like,
Oh,
she was just tonight, I could tell she loves phones, and she was like playing with my phone, and I won't unlock it for her, because she would do, probably delete half my apps and change it to German or something like that. And so, but she wanted me to unlock it, and she kept like taking the phone and putting it in my hands and tapping the screen and stuff like that. And, she communicates without saying a word. So.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I'm seeing Jim's facial expressions and responses this whole time.
well, it's a very different experience being a grandparent to both of the girls. The younger one definitely is starting to be able to teach us when they come to visit We will sometimes take both girls for the weekend, and the younger granddaughter will teach us, oh yeah, she wants this, or she's trying to tell you that. She's just been able to start doing that sort of thing. But yeah, Nora has been, or she's been communicating. We've seen her try for so long, and she's getting better at it. So that we're starting to understand it now too. And it was just the most amazing thing. It wasn't that long ago when she first started to hug for real. I mean, we were just up visiting, and Dave kind of walked her over, and she actually reached up, grabbed me, pulled me in, and was hugging. And it was out of the clear blue. That was the holy cow, the most amazing thing. That she was able to express that for the first time with me. I mean, she'll laugh. She plays these weird little games where, I mean, I don't know if she still does this or not, but you toss her like a ball or something like that. She'll toss it back. You toss it again, and then she'll toss it off to the side. And you go, oh, okay, you probably meant to send it to me, but I'll go get it. I'll toss it to you, and then you'll toss it back to her and tosses it to the other side. You look at her, she's got this grin on her face. Like, yeah, I'm gonna make you go get that.
She's playing fetch with you, basically.
Yeah. She's like, okay, I get this. Yeah, you're playing with me here. All right. So yeah, I mean, they're like they said. She's well, they both are. She's just absolute joys. There's a happiness there that outside of being, when it's bedtime, is just incredible. And I'm sure that it's not always there because we don't see them all the time. And I know we hear stories of, oh gosh, yeah, this was a rough day. And we've seen a little bit of it from time to time, but overall, she's just an absolute delight. And I think both Dave and his wife there have done an amazing job, an incredible job with all the burdens of it all. They found a way to make it come together. So, yeah.
Thinking about your son Dave as like growing up and how he's changed over the years, how does that compare to like how he became a father?
I try not to think about how old he's getting. No, that's one of the strange things about life, is that in my head, I'm still 27 years old. So when I see these things happen, it's always a shock to me that, oh yeah, he's not a kid anymore. And it's just, so I have to keep reminding myself that, yeah, okay, yep, like you said, just step back and listen. Don't try to solve everything. Just, okay, I'll back off. I won't try to do that, and just try to help out where I can, when I can, just offer whatever. But yeah, we've been very, very proud of both he and his brother, the men that they have become, and the husbands and fathers. They've both done an amazing job with them. I think far better than I did. So it's very weird watching that. I know my parents felt the same thing watching me grow up, because we had that conversation once in a while, and now I'm experiencing it with them. It's just very bizarre. So I have to get used to realizing that I'm not 27 anymore, and that he's not 12 anymore.
Well, I think I did want to mention that there's been a very active Facebook chat going on throughout this whole time. You've inspired a lot of people sharing experiences and stories of their own. It's been really cool to see, and
that's awesome.
Both of you are getting a lot of love from the audience for what you're sharing. yeah, so so much appreciation all around. And as we're coming to a close, we have some questions for you from, shout out to Theater Artibus. We're partnering with Theater Artibus to create this project called Recipe for Community. And there are specific questions we have for you that they want to take and put into their interactive online experience. You want to start us off?
Yeah. So everybody watching, go check out Theater Artibus. I'm so glad you did that shout out. Okay, so because this is a part of a series, they had a performance in the end of 2019 as well, and the theme is recipe. So these are all recipe-based questions. And a first question is, what is a meal that you could eat all day?
Breakfast.
What would you have for breakfast? Like cereal?
Anything breakfast. Cereal, pancakes, eggs and toast.
Yeah.
You name it. If it's breakfast food, I could eat it all day long.
Nice.
The only other thing that I really have to have is a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but that's lunch.
That's such a classic.
Yeah, wow.
Nice.
Lately it's been buffalo wings, I guess.
Nice.
Super spicy or normal?
Medium. Once it starts burning my mouth, it's a bit different.
Yeah, it's your brother that likes that stuff. Okay, I'm with you there.
Nice. Do you want to take the next one?
Sure. We kind of already touched on this, but I feel like this is a good question to go deeper into. What do you do to care for others, and what do you do to care for yourself?
To care for others, I try to just make myself available for whatever they may need, and if I can possibly manage it, then okay, I can do that. No skin off my back. I can try and do that. I try to listen more than I talk. That's basically it. For myself, I don't know. Writing, exercise, sometimes a Dairy Queen blizzard.
Ooh. I haven't had one of those in so long.
I know, it's killing me. Our little Dairy Queen up here was closed for the COVID stuff. Ugh.
What kind of blizzard?
Huh?
What kind of blizzard?
Anything with chocolate and nuts in it.
Nice.
Wide palate.
Comfort food.
How about you, Dave?
I think it takes sacrifice a bit, and it takes vulnerability about and then, like my dad said, being available is also a key part, because if you're not available, you can have the best intentions in the world, but you're not there to do it, so doing all those things and listening, I think, is key. For self-care, I'm honestly pretty bad at self-care. I'm horrible at eating breakfast, and it feels like, especially now with the kids, it's just like surviving the day and getting to bedtime. And I like video games. That's kind of what I do. And I read some, and I talk a lot with people from church and other friends, and I think the key there is to just be vulnerable and honest about how I'm feeling, and that took a while too. I feel like sometimes as guys it's hard because you're taught to be like, John Wayne, never cry and stuff like that, or you have this perception, at least, and
Hopefully, I didn't do that.
when you learn that emotions and feelings are two different things, you're like, what? And so I think I've probably cried more since my daughter was born than I did my entire life before that. So just being okay with sadness and being okay with other things. So
That's great. So I think this might be our last question. What is your recipe for community? So what do you think it takes to have a good, healthy community?
Beef stew. No, seriously, when I grew up, everybody always referred to the United States as the melting pot. We're anything but a melting pot. We're a whole bunch of different stuff all thrown together. That's beef stew. If any one component, any one ingredient overpowers the rest, it's terrible. It's all got to work together to make a good beef stew. That's what we need to be.
That's nice. I love that.
All these questions on
food and recipes.
Yeah, I think it's just, before COVID hit, we live in a little cul-de-sac, and we kind of made it a point to make sure we meet our neighbors. It's so easy, well, maybe especially this year now, but I feel like that's something that's kind of got lost with our generation, was actually going outside and meeting your neighbors and actually hanging out with them and knowing what's going on in their lives. And not just as soon as you get home, retreating into your house, but actually knowing their names and knowing their stories and knowing what's going on in their lives. And hopefully hopefully we can get back to that a bit. Once, sorry, frog in the throat. Once this kind of COVID stuff, whenever it goes away or whatever. So
yeah, that's been a problem here. We just bought this new house back in late August, I guess it was. We've met a couple of the next door neighbors, but we haven't been able to actually have them over for anything, and they can't have us over for anything. We want to get to know them. They seem like very nice people, but we can't do anything yet, and it's killing us.
Yeah.
So, oh well.
It seems like isolation is a really big problem for everyone right now. Yeah, unfortunately. You said that was the last question?
That's the last one we got written down.
Yeah.
You mind if I throw up a couple of extra little fun Denver past?
Yes,
pictures?
love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, well, those of you that are before mid-90s Denver, you might recognize having seen something like this. David, you know this.
Is that an airplane flying over the freeway?
No, it's taxiing over I-70. The old Stapleton Airport, a couple of its runways went right over top of the highway.
Oh, that's so dangerous! Oh my God!
The hell is
yeah, that's I-70, kind of near Quebec.
And actually, you were talking about traffic earlier. That's pretty much rush hour traffic at that time.
Oh my God! I wish that was rush hour traffic now.
So that was when Denver's airport was at Stapleton.
Did any plane ever veer off and land on the freeway?
It was actually really wide.
Okay.
I mean, it was a very, very wide thing. It wasn't like a normal road sort of a deal.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
This was the Denver Broncos helmet when I moved out here.
Oh my God!
Are you?
That's so goofy.
That horse looks dead.
Yeah, that was struggling.
Yeah, I think somebody's second grade kid drew the picture and put it on. Denver's budget was not really big in the 60s.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Well,
funny.
a few of our guests do remember the airplane going over the highway.
Oh, that's
All right. Anybody remember the helmet?
Well, thank you guys so much for tonight. Is there any final thoughts? Anything you want to leave us with? Leave our audience with?
Especially for
Maybe
people-
real quick, I was gonna. So there's a site that describes my it's kind of a fundraiser or a just a informational thing for my daughter's genetic condition. It's called projectap.com.
Project, let me write this down really quick. Project
8P.
8 as in the number? Or-
Yeah.
Okay.
project8p.org.
.com.
.com.
And they're trying to every year we do a conference for families of AP, and they're trying to raise funds for these families to get together. I don't know if it will happen this year with COVID, but we've done it in New York and we did it in Colorado Springs one year, and I think it's going to be back in Denver this summer. So
It's what, Columbia University that's doing the...
yeah, we went. It's sponsored by Columbia University in Manhattan, and there's some other universities involved now and stuff.
Oh.
But it's if anyone's ever curious about this rare genetic thing, it's a good resource. So
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I doubled down on that. Anybody watching, check it out. Learn more about what Dave's family is experiencing and support if you can.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us on, for being on you here with us and talking to us and sharing your stories. It's really cool because we never really know where these conversations are gonna go or what's gonna, come up, and it's really cool to see how things unfold.
Yeah, that's kind of like teaching middle school. You never know where it's going to go from the beginning of class to the end. Make your best plans.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Facebook. We love you. We'll be back on this couch soon enough.
Yep.
Probably Monday. We are always live streaming. So
Yeah. And check out Theater Artemis and the great work that they're doing with this whole recipe project. Shout out to them, and thank you so much for being a part of this.
okay. Bye.
Bye.
All right.